Reduce threat or stress by providing a comfortable interview environment that will not be interrupted in any way. Use small talk to open the conversation. Give valid and true compliments, and use acceptance as a technique to avoid condemning or condoning. For example, "That's interesting. Tell me more." "I see. Could you just provide a bit more detail on how job performance was determined?" Remember the first impression fallacy. To avoid putting too much emphasis on personality rather than competency, ask tougher questions if, after the first 20 minutes, you like someone. If you don't like someone, ask easier questions. This shift increases objectivity. If there will be multiple interviewers, make sure there's a common set of key questions that's covered by all. Don't jump to conclusions. Remember, people have a combination of strengths and weaknesses. Make sure you've already decided what defines superior performance for the job at hand. Okay, now the following are some open-ended behavioral-based questions and strategies. Like so many other things in life, there are really no absolutes. What works best is what feels most natural to you. Here's one. Tell me about yourself. The purpose of this question is to have the candidate have a chance to talk about themselves. So sit back and learn about how a person organizes and presents a complex topic. The question, "Do you have any questions?" is a good one. Most candidates expect this query at the end instead of at the beginning of an interview. It can be a great question to start with. Asking it at the beginning of an interview will give you a great opportunity to find out how well the applicant has done his or her homework. The list. Some interviewers like to hand the candidate a list of 5 to 10 questions saying, "Here are many of the questions I would normally ask you over the next, say, 30 minutes. Feel free to take a moment and then answer them in any order you're most comfortable with. We can fill in blanks at the end." Can you give me an example of how you demonstrated creativity in your last job? This is a good question to ask candidates. Another good question is, how do you assess an opportunity? Do not be more specific with this question. Allow the applicant to define what kind of opportunity he or she wants to dissect. The choice itself will be very telling. During the interview, try to think in opposites. For example, if a person is into generalities, they speak in very general terms, make them focus on specifics. If he or she concentrates on the past, focus more of your questions on the present. If the applicant is cool and distant, try to be relaxed and approachable to break down the barriers to good communication. Another question you could ask during the interview is, have you worked in a team environment in which not everyone pulled his or her weight, and how did you handle it? If the candidate says no, ask what he or she would do in such a situation. These and similar questions should help you assess judgment, conceptual ability, verbal skills, logic, intellectual horsepower, thinking style, personal and professional strengths, and the capacity and application of skills in the candidates you're interviewing. Remember, there's no benefit to leading a candidate on. There's nothing wrong with saying during the interview process, "I'm sorry, but I don't see this going any further. I appreciate your time and interest, though." You may want to verify that if you're on a search committee, that everyone is on board with doing that. If you're working with other people, they may not feel that the candidate should be given the boot and may want additional time to interview the person or to make their decision. For those who don't make the first cut but who won't receive an offer, treat them with courtesy and leave the door open if appropriate. A simple "I'm sorry, we've chosen another candidate, but if all goes well, we may have an opening next quarter. I would be delighted to have another interview at that time." You don't want to create a bad impression with anyone that comes in for an interview. They may be the perfect applicant for possibly another position within your company, if not the one that they're applying for. And also, depending on the type of business you have, they may be a potential customer. If they have a good experience interviewing with you, they may not come back to work for your company, but they may come back as a customer. When you do make your decision, and hire the perfect fit for the job, be sure to check employee references and perform a background investigation on the candidate. Undertaking an employee background investigation for each member of the company has worked marvels for employers large and small and will provide you with peace of mind. Standard employee checks include driving and credit records, employment for the past 10 years, social security number, education, and criminal background. Your company may choose to perform these checks in-house, though it's common to use third-party or outside investigation services. And finally, remember that human capital is the most important capital there is. Make sure you create an environment that fosters a long-term relationship with that person. Well, this is the end of the lectures for week 4 on interviewing. I appreciate you listening to them, and I look forward to reading your work again this week.
I don't think you should go internal all the time. I don't believe in that. I actually think to be dynamic, you probably want to be internal 70% or 80% of the time, but 20 or 30%, even at senior levels, you want to be able to get new viewpoints and new approaches from the outside. When you go outside, I think you got to be open-minded. You'll probably only be right 50 to 70% of the time. If you talk, as I do, to guys who lead other big companies, I think most people think 50% is a pretty good hit rate for outside hires, and 70% is phenomenal. I used to not believe as much as I do today in references. I think references are pretty important, as long as you get a reference from somebody who will be direct with you, as opposed to, so it's tough to get references, but I think they're very important. When I interview people, I'm looking for 2 things. I'm looking for passion. It doesn't need to be bubbly, but you need to see the passion, and you always can. You can always see it in the eyes. Even if somebody's quiet, you can see somebody's passion in their eyes. And I need a guy who I'll be able to relate to, which means I ask them to tell me something they're proud about and tell me about it in detail, because I feel like they ought to be able to explain it at the kind of level that makes sense to me, or things probably don't work. So I generally do that with somebody in an interview.